How you doing, guys? Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. Obviously, we're in a really hairy situation with international affairs, so something that's come up a lot over the past few weeks and months on my channel and elsewhere in the media and alternative media is the possibility of some kind of nuclear event. Anything from a dirty bomb to a tactical nuke used in Ukraine or somewhere, or even a test as a show of force, all the way up to a full-blown kind of full-on nuclear exchange between Russia and the US and NATO. And one of the things, the comments that I keep seeing a lot, and I think it's pure cope actually, is, or some kind of cope I guess, is the repeated people who are always saying something along the lines of, well, there's no way to survive a nuclear event, so there's no reason to prepare for it, because if it happens, you're just going to be dead. And fortunately / unfortunately, that's almost certainly not the case. Even in the event of a massive full-scale nuclear attack by both sides, I would venture to say that most people in either country, specifically more than 50%, will probably be alive after the initial attack. And that would be maybe even worse, depending on your view on things. And certainly, if it's a limited nuclear exchange, most people, vast majority of people will still be alive, won't be, because that logic only works if you're like vaporized directly in the initial blast, which will happen to some people, especially depending on where you're at, if you're on a military base or something or right next to it. But we've even seen that it's more likely now that nuclear doctrine on both sides is not just going to be to blanket the entire country's civilian areas with nukes. It will be to attack any sort of major infrastructure, but specifically to attack military and command structures. And they'll probably just hit multiple barrages on those areas as opposed to just evenly blanketing the country, because what does that benefit? You don't need to just vaporize the civilian population to win. The way you would win is by protecting your civilian populations while simultaneously destroying the ability of the other country to actually do anything in response. So certainly if someone's doing a first strike, which is now unfortunately also in the doctrine of the US, that's been changed recently. It used to be that our official nuclear doctrine was to never do an initial first strike with nukes. The only way we would ever use nukes was if they were used against us, but now that's been officially changed to where there are situations where it could be authorized to be the first one to use nukes, which I guess isn't that crazy because we're the only country to have ever used them. But the point is, anyone who's striking first with nukes is not just going to nuke city centers. There might be a few in there for effect, like DC or something. But again, that's related to command elements that are leadership and stuff that's in those places. But most of the time, a first strike would be trying to take out as much of the ability of that country to respond with their own nukes. So it'll be all the nuke locations, major military bases and strategic command centers. Maybe a couple infrastructural things like power plants, stuff like that. Major ones that would wipe out a whole area. But regardless, the point is that even in a major strike, most people will survive the initial blast. You go on the nuke map, if they start dropping 50 megaton bombs everywhere, things might get a little weird. But like I said, the worst scenario, honestly, is that you're close enough to the blast to get serious effects, but not close enough to be instantly vaporized, and you've done no preparations. Because then you might still die, probably will still die, but it'll be a very painful, uncomfortable death from radiation sickness, serious burns, and things like that. So I really don't like that train of thought of, where I'm just going to die, so there's no reason to prepare, simply because you will die if you don't prepare, but a lot of those people will survive if you do basic preparation, something like this Mira CBRN mask. Link will be in the description. Something like potassium iodide pills. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about these. This is not some radiation beating or anti-radiation medication. It simply stops one element of the radiation, the radioactive iodine, from it, which your thyroid likes to collect iodine. So if it's not already clogged up with this iodine, it'll pick up the radioactive iodine. Whereas small amounts of radiation hitting you is not nearly as bad as it being lodged in your thyroid gland, where you would get cancer there. And then something like Tyvek suits if you had to venture outside. And information, I know Canadian Prepper mentioned this book, information. All links to all the stuff will be in the description. But if you have that stuff, maybe even an apple pectin, things like that, basic preparation, specifically an air filter and a plan to shelter in a building, is if the building you're in does not get wiped out instantly, and you can be 12 feet or more from the edges, specifically if you have a basement or a lot of space or a lot of shielding, and you can shelter and filter your air and take the potassium iodide for the first even 48 to 72 hours, your chances of survival are really, really good. And if you have made sure you don't get dosed heavily with radiation, your chances of long-term survival are even better, because that's what all these people are going to experience. All the people who say you're not going to survive, so there's no use to preparing, most of them would survive even a major nuclear event, but they would get heavily dosed with radiation, and then they would die extremely painfully a little while later, or maybe even years later. So that's what you can prevent, is an extremely painful, unsavory death. So, and like I said, this stuff, you can even get much cheaper gas masks than this if you want. I'm not going to risk it, but I'll put the link in the description to those. Anything that like really does a good job of filtering dust particles out, P100 or or anything better like CBRN, and then the potassium iodide, the ability to keep it off your skin, and just a sheltering plan. And then as long as you're not initially vaporized, like I said, some people will be, but most people will not be. Most people will have to survive in the aftermath. And just expecting to just be vaporized is going to put you in a really, really shitty position if you haven't done some basic preparation. So, like I said, I don't think there's going to be a nuclear attack, but it does seem to be getting more likely every day. So, just do the basic preps. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later.